I look this way, and then when I turn, that's my hammer. That's my clapper. Like this. So.
Okay.
Well, hello, everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of Ola Man Living Life with Purity. And today I've got Alex Fiato back in the studio with me. And I wanted to follow up with Alex here with a little bit of a Q&A, going over his recent segment he did there on George Washington's visit by Our Lady back during the days of Valley Forge, and the implications of what that has for designs on this country going forward, and how that may relate to a previous segment I did on Pietas and the differences in revolutions between the U.S. side of things, the Jeffersonian model, and then there was the French method of revolution with lots of decapitations and mayhem going on, the Robespierre version and the Reign of Terror. So there was a lot of differences in there, and a lot of things that Alex was able to bring out in his recent instructional, educational video there. And I put it out there as one long segment there that you could come in and use as a reference piece going forward. So wherever it is in that hour and 20-some minutes of timeline on there, you'll be able to find what it is you may want to go back in and punch out and pull out or clip out to add and share with your friends and followers as well. So feel free to do that. You can always clip these segments and reuse them as is, as long as you don't change them in their nature. So that's always part of our arrangements here with YouTube. But Alex, I want to thank you for there was a lot of hard work that went into that, and I know because I know what it is for me to just do a simple little segment.
Yeah, did
but
very
I
nice.
want to thank you for that, and I hope people appreciate
welcome.
that. But I've got a question I want to ask you.
Sure.
Why the Blessed Mother and why George Washington?
Very interesting because Washington asked her several times. He called her, quote, singularly beautiful female, but she would not answer him as to who she was. Now, there's a mystery in that, and I'll give you my take on it. I think a lot of these people in the Revolution were mainly Protestant in terms of background, and I don't think that Our Lady wanted to, bring in the idea that my son sent me to talk to you. That she was more interested, and Jesus was more interested in the formation of this country without getting into some kind of a theological distraction. Well, I'm the mother of Jesus, you know what I mean? They were interested in what you were talking about in the revolution being centered on God and the individual as opposed to the revolution.
So this was a juxtaposition as to what was going on with the French model, which took a Catholic country and tried to disavow it, and what happened with all the bloodshed.
Well, you betcha,
and when
because
they
when
took
Catholic.
God out of the equation, out of the arguments,
Sure.
It all became about man. She wanted to make sure that didn't happen here because the U.S. Revolution was following on the heels of the French Revolution.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So the motivation was that these framers of the Declaration, the Constitution, their motive was real, and that mankind has to be under God. Well, of course, the French should have known this because France was a great nation. They called it one of the greatest nations to present Christ and Our Lady to the world. But here it is, a revolution, and you described it as being a horrifying.
Well, it's the elitists decided that they knew better than the common man because the common man was too dumb to figure out left from right type of stuff. So they imparted their demands for wisdom their way upon the common people. Kind of like what we got going on today, don't we?
Well, that's frightening. I think you made the point, too, that how are we going to get out of this thing? And then, of course, you said, Our Lady says, we have to be grounded feather strokes, and we have to be respectful to God and to our neighbor, and we can debate it, but we can't club each other.
Right. You have to make sure we have that all put together there. So, I think she was very definite in that with feather strokes being the way and not hammer blows, because the battles are going to be there, whichever way it happens, I believe. But
the battles are.
But what you have to do is you have to have that groundwork, and maybe that's what Our Lady was looking for was to instill in George Washington and his fellows, Protestants though they may have been.
Absolutely.
But they were very, very strong. Like I said, when I was, talking about that with you, I said I think they're a very strong, God-fearing people. The only thing that they were lacking was the presence of the Eucharist in their lives.
And that didn't seem to be an impediment for Christ to send his mother to engage with this group of people that were designing a new nation. So,
but
the
people,
mother of God being a human being.
And this is probably one of the reasons that Mary didn't enter into profile in the church more so until the Middle Ages, because
Correct.
had they promoted her earlier on, they would have deified her.
That's correct.
And then she'd have been totally unapproachable.
Absolutely.
So the humanization of Mary,
Right.
takes place here, I think, pretty much after the Council on Trent in the 1500s. Then Mary starts being focused on more with the concepts of talking about her being immaculately conceived, and so the Immaculate Conception. I don't know exactly when that first concept was talked about, but I think a lot of things happened around that period of the growth of the church, and when they opened the seminaries finally, we actually had formal training of priests and other.
So getting your
clergy.
buddy to be a priest and go out there and collect money. You said
Well-
they were just it was a
Well, it was
shoot from the hip.
Well, to be a priest back in
ordination.
those days, you just went to work with another guy who was a priest, but there wasn't any formal training for these guys. And so what the Council of Trent did is it ended up formalizing the beginning of actual seminaries, and then we'd have these formators in there that would help to build the priests and make them in a uniform method going out, which made the state governments, the kings and the larger governments much more happy, because now there was some sort of stability that was going on. It wasn't
Few
this guy's
rules
a
to
priest
them.
over here, but who formed him? Well, he was formed. This old guy
Right.
over there was a priest, and
He was at a bar and they thought he was a good guy. They decided.
yeah.
to
Well,
let him in.
I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of networking. They didn't have LinkedIn back then. No Facebook.
Speaking of Washington, I would like to read what Torellius said when he was first released in 86, 87.
From
And
Reagan's pressure.
That's absolutely right. In other words, President Reagan was told by probably a guy by the name of Skubik that there's a fella in jail named Joseph Torellia, and if Gorbachev means what he says, get him to release this guy. They really didn't want to release.
No,
Torellia.
they didn't want Joseph on this side.
He was a problem. But anyway, Joseph says this, October the 22nd, 1987, he said, I appeared in Washington, D.C. before the Congressional Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe. In attendance were luminaries such as Senator Alphonse D'Amato of New York, Senator Frank Ludinger of New Jersey, and Rochester Congresswoman Louis Slater. He said, there I was in the nation of the magnificent Statue of Liberty. I believe America has many spiritual problems, but she's like the statue. She's the beacon of freedom. A militarily strong United States is essential to all the world. There is no telling what could have happened had America not been there to counter the spread of communism. In a captivated world and subjugated world, we know that the United States bears the torch of freedom. I said under questioning, I said, this is a country which built its state based on the Bible, and therefore it is very important how the government of the United States relates to its atheistic governments and external affairs. And he says, I emphasize that the USSR is the first state in the world which openly stated its hatred of God.